Well, salutations, dear viewers. You're on with the Nexon of the Vast Nexus, and I just thought, for the interest of my viewing audience, in case anybody's interested in playing this game, since it is free to play, that I'd give a unit breakdown in my experience. Now, in full disclosure, I'm not super familiar with the kind of general classes of hero shooters, but having played this a lot since the time I first played it and recorded it, which is embarrassing to watch in retrospect, because I had no idea what I was doing, I have figured out these units for the most part. Now we're going to move down the list in the linear fashion that they're listed here. I'll be touching on the gated mobile suits, but yeah, I don't have all of them. I just got Unicorn, and I'll probably have Zaku II Melee or Exia, depending on certain conditions, once I can unlock a second. But yeah, we'll start with Pale Rider, and this is the practice mode. So, Pale Rider has a bullpup machine gun with ADS, the Hades mode, which basically just amps up all of his basic abilities, hand grenade, EMP grenade. This has a really short range. It's more of an anti-pursuit thing, like a pursuit deterrent, and the repair pod. Now, this ties into what I feel is Pale Rider's role, because Pale Rider has an arsenal that might seem comparable to, like, the Zaku II ranged, but this is actually like a mid-range support mobile suit.
Looks like you could use a hand. Need a revive? I'm on it. Revival complete.
So you have a placeable healing item. An important detail with regards to that is that right there should tell you that it's not something meant to be used super aggressively, because your placeable healing item is vulnerable to destruction, and basically, if you want to help allies in the front, because it's a really short lob, like, even if I get the most momentum on this thing possible,
Commencing combat support.
it does not go that far out. So, Pale Rider, in my experience, is the sort of thing that you'll have allies up in front, and you'll use the benefit of this thing's ADS to get better accuracy than the Zaku II ranged is capable of, in order to whittle down the enemy, because it's not a super powerful weapon. I mean, even at this distance, if I go for body, I nearly run down a magazine bringing down a Zaku II. And, I mean, headshots, of course, are much faster if you get in up close, but the real problem is disengaging. The Zaku II ranged has a lot of advantages for disengaging. It has an extra boost, and it has temporary invulnerability because of its smoke grenade. You only have 2 boosts as the Pale Rider, and your only way of deterring pursuit is to just drop one of those EMPs. Now, this training area is well stocked. We actually have some running Zaku, so we can test some more elaborate things.
Try this on for size.
Yeah, that makes them much easier to target.
Try this on for size.
Yeah, the grenades on the Pale Rider also do not have a stun. So you can use them to ramp up your damage a bit, but you can't lob them around corners to, like, blind grenade. You can't... There's a lot of stuff. Now, the Hades mode... General improvement of Pale Rider's abilities, but, I mean, a Barbatos would probably make quick work of you. A Sazabi could probably shotgun you down, especially if they make critical hits. You can close range with the Pale Rider. I would not recommend it. It's a flexible unit, but I definitely feel it's more of a support unit. The fact that it has a healing function is just a part of that. Now, I'll admit, I don't have a whole lot of experience with Pale Rider. I usually use Zaku II Melee. I did have a couple of good rounds where I was doing exactly what I suggested with this, hanging back at medium range and just trying to apply damage. Like, it works fine in that purpose. That's Pale Rider.
Deploy.
Now, for the RX-78, defense would probably be a key point, because you'll note the bloom on this thing, even if I'm perfectly still. need to be reasonably close. Now, of course, if you ADS, you can make those ever-important critical hits, which, given the limited quantity of shots in this beam rifle, it's less than turn A. You really should probably be using this in that form, because unless you're right on top of your target, in which a lot of other mobile suits will have a number of distinct advantages, it can be very difficult to hit. Now, you have a beneficial bailout strategy in the form of your shield. You also have the hammer. It's got a long wind-up, a steep arc, and long travel, but
Shield integrity is holding. My shield is degrading.
yeah, your shield can take some punishment. However, I should point out that you can fire while you have it up. It limits, I think it limits your mobility. Oh no, you can still dash.
My shield is degrading. Shield integrity is holding.
But note too that in addition to your shield being disabled, it will actually time out. So you're more limited in your defensive capabilities. The RX-78 is definitely more of an offensive support unit.
How's this?
And then, of course, we have the Super Napalm, which is a very powerful defensive thing. Or offensive, it depends on how it's deployed.
My G maneuver.
Good for objective denial. Like, if you want to keep your enemy off of something, hold that napalm in reserve, because it's very effective. Yeah, just moving has a substantial negative impact on your aim. And with only those 7 shots...
Reloading.
Thankfully, the sound actually kind of cues you in as to when you can make another accurate shot again. If you let the sound effect of the weapon run down.
G maneuver armed and ready. Reloading. Try activating G maneuver.
So yeah, I'm not entirely sure what class you'd give this. It's pretty multi-purpose, but it's definitely a ranged option. A Gundam up close has got a lot of problems. I mean, sure, it could just pap away with its beam rifle, but even trying to go for headshots, you'd have to be right on top of your target. And of course, the issue is that, like, a Zaku could probably run me down before I can kill it.
Allied suit revived.
Okay, well, that Zaku wasn't aiming for the head, as opposing players are likely to do. Thing is, I find that oftentimes, yeah, the Gundam works best if you hang back, crack shields with the Gundam hammer, because I think that's one of its intended roles. So yeah, I can't give a distinct role for that. Ranged support, kind of offensive. This is definitely a strictly offensive. Well, actually. Yeah, beam rifle, it's got an ADS, super napalm. Yeah, damage, stun, knockback, and disables the shield when it hits. That doesn't mean... I'm not sure if it actually removes their shield or just temporarily disables it. Gundam shield, lasts for a set duration, or until it absorbs maximum damage. Ends early if you attack or use thrusters, but allows dashing and hovering. So yeah, the Zaku II ranged... Ranged is a misnomer for this thing. Because even at, because this feels like a medium distance. Okay, a little bit further back. Try on you. Short bursts don't help this thing much either. Because the spread is immediate as soon as you start firing the weapon. It just doesn't work. What you want to be is, here. Like, what would seem distinctly to be kind of a melee distance, because here, half a mag of body, or a mag of body, half a mag of head, and you can bring down a target pretty easily. Because most of the, high-level Zaku II range players I've seen, they will dash up, just dump into you, pop their invincibility, and dash away, because that's the point. Unlike Pale Rider, you have 3 boost charges, and that smoke grenade buys you 2 to 3 seconds of actual invincibility. You also have the Crackler as an anti-pursuit option, because the Crackler will actually stun units, which can do stuff like interrupt Barbatos' melee charge.
Try this on for size.
That was a lousy throw.
How's this?
That was also a lousy throw. Okay, let's just do the ultimate.
G maneuver.
Yeah, the ultimate of the Zaku II is a little disappointing. It's a very short-range Heat Hawk slash.
How's this?
Yeah, that immobility, stunned for a bit. So it can interrupt certain maneuvers. It can be a little hard to hit because unlike Pale Rider, it doesn't impact detonate. It actually sits on location and then blows up after a delay. Yeah, you dash in. Unload on the guy. Hopefully you bring him down in that time. And then pop your invincibility and boost off with your triple boost. Because you can cover a lot of ground in that triple boost. So very hit and run, but definitely a close range aggressor, an offensive class.
Try this on for size. G maneuver. Ready. I'm reloading.
A solid grenade hit followed by a spray of the machine gun works wonders for guaranteeing that you actually take your target down in a single mag dump. Because the reload's quick, but the time to kill in this game is so fast that you will not get a second chance. Let's check out the range here.
G maneuver.
Yeah, that's not a tremendous amount of distance. You can blast through multiple targets that way, but as you saw, it only, like, wiped half their health. It is not a very powerful ultimate.
How's this?
Still, Zaku II is a workhorse. If you know how to use it, if you can dash in, blast a guy, dash around him a bit, don't overuse your dash, because that's your exit strategy, and then pop your smoke and bail out. Very potent unit. In domination missions, when you're capping the objective, that smoke giving you that temporary invincibility is super useful.
G maneuver.
So we'll
Ready.
check it. Yeah, very basic. No ADS on the machine gun. Smoke discharger. Concussive blast, knockback, stuns units in a small area, and of course the Heat Hawk slash, which is underwhelming to say the least. Now Barbatos.
Deploying.
I know in theory how you're supposed to use Barbatos, but in practice I'm not very good at it. Now my initial conception, which was entirely wrong, was just walk up to somebody and just start smacking them with the primary fire, but you can see how long that takes to bring the target down. If you're fighting using a Barbatos that way, you're doing it wrong. The intended method is a fully charged Whomp, and then one hit with the thwack, which happens seemingly faster than if you just trigger it out of, like, a standby state. Basically cleans up most targets. And if the target happens to be persistent, you give them this whack, and then this whack, and then you start beating them with the mace. Now, to help you close the gap, because of course it is a melee mobile suit, we have this. 9 times out of 10 if Barbatos gets the better of you, it'll be because they landed that hit. Yeah, the timing on it, though, has to be very precise. If you muck up the timing, you're down to just dashing away, and hopefully you have a leap to give you that extra bit of distance.
Activating my G maneuver.
Now, yeah, the G maneuver is powerful, but you really need your enemies clustered together to make the most of it. Yeah, look at how... Do not rely on this left-click thwack. It is so anemic. This is meant to finish... Because that's the weird part. You'd think left-click, that's your primary attack, but this is exclusively meant to finish off a target that has already been damaged with the bonk. Otherwise, you're not doing it right. You're not doing Barbatos right. So we get the mace. Deals damage and knockback, but not stun. The smash, hold up the charge, damaging, stunning, key point. Got the long sword. Enemies reduced to 0 HP are destroyed rather than disabled. Yes, very good for finishing off tough targets, the longsword. But the AoE is very limited. The boost jump cooldown resets if you kill an enemy immediately, so if you pull off this successfully, you can make a quick getaway. But you'll probably have to as a Barbatos, unless you find an enemy isolated. And then, of course, we have... Because I'm not super familiar with Iron-Blooded Orphans. Alia... I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Yeah, you get 3 slashes. Thing is, it'll take 2 of them just to down... Because these are Zaku II, so 800 health. If you consider, like, a Sazabi, which has 1200... yeah, ideally you want to use it on targets that have been softened up by, like, an ally with an AoE weapon. It can work, but the thing is a lot of players are wising up to Barbatos, because it makes a fair amount of noise as it, like, moves around. And if you see this coming, the simple strategy is literally just dodge out of the way of it. Because once the leap is blown, if it hasn't eliminated you, it's down to using its dashes, which it can certainly close the gap with the dashes that it has, but if it's missed the swing, it's down to a 5-second cooldown, so it's going to be forced to either stun you with the blade, or just start thwacking you, which I demonstrated how ineffective this is as a direct means of attack. Or it's going to have to use up its exit strategy trying to close the gap and then try to, like, away. Or use the jump. So yes, with the Barbatos, you're great or you're terrible. It all depends on how you use it and how it synergizes with the team. It's clearly an offensive unit because it has 0 defensive capabilities to speak of, naturally. And now for something completely different, the Sazabi, which is... definitely a tank. Really? Through me? Now, one of the things with shield units that can actually hold up their shields while they're engaging is that they cannot reload while shielded. So those 7 rounds you have in your shotgun are your life. Either the fight ends in those 7 rounds, or you're going to have problems.
Shield integrity is holding.
So yeah, the Sazabi shield can take an enormous amount of punishment, and then, 1400 health. Sazabi itself can take an enormous amount of punishment. Now, one of Sazabi's most underrated functions is the C button function. The enemy search detects the enemy through any obstacle for a short time. Now, it's important to note that it doesn't work for you. What happens is, and we can test it here, if I see an enemy with it enabled, they'll be shown for the team once they pass behind a barrier. But guys already on the other side of the barrier are not displayed. Now, you can use your shotgun, of course, while your shield is up. You should generally have your shield up as often as possible with the Sazabi. You can use the Heat Hawk, but it will temporarily drop your shield. So, shield is up. Not the Heat Hawk, the Beam Tomahawk? Yeah, it will temporarily drop your shield. Now, the thing is, that Tomahawk and the lunge thing that it enables is how you make up for Sazabi's lack of mobility, because its boost is this. It is a slow boy. And it's only got the one evasive boost as well. However, I can give you a demonstration of how you can cover ground quickly. So, you find some high ground. Obviously, works better with an open map. And then pull yourself towards the saw, and boom. Now, one key point when popping the ultimate, do not do it while you're exposed, because your defense drops completely when it first activates. I don't even have to look at them. Yeah, the funnels are very powerful. They can potentially aggro on enemies on the other sides of walls. But you need to be very careful where you trigger it. You're also going to be a priority target, because if you go down before the effect has finished.
Try this on for size.
If you go down before the effect has finished, it negates the funnels. They'll stop operating. So you need to stay alive for the full duration of your G maneuver. Now the axe has a few other uses. It will break shields completely. And that lunge ability actually deals damage. So I'm going to plant the axe behind this guy and then lunge through him. And yeah, I actually hit him. Not for much, but it can displace and disrupt an enemy, and you can potentially lunge through multiple targets simultaneously.
How's this?
Key point as well is that while you can dash, well actually you can't dash with your shield up, it forcibly drops your shield. You can lunge with your shield up.
Try this on for size.
So shield up, and you can lunge right through the target. It's good for getting in behind the enemy, like maybe to get it to a health pickup or try to get your back up against the wall, because you are of course still fully exposed from behind. Unfortunately, this is not a good counter for Jim's Sniper 2s, because even though the shield will, I think, protect you from getting a critical, from being hit by a critical headshot, yeah, you're not going to be able to do anything to them with the shotgun. And if you pause to whip out the tomahawk, you're inviting a headshot in those few seconds it's in flight.
Activating my G maneuver.
Yeah, that's actually one of the more devastating G maneuvers in terms of damage. I want to test its ability to potentially track targets out of line of sight. I'm showing a little extra time to the Sazabi, because I do like tanky units, and I have a fair amount of experience with this thing. So yeah, if you have run your shoddy down... There's the other one. Yep, no boom until you drop the shield to reload.
Reloading.
Very powerful within its effective range, but that effective range is limited. Okay, so we know we got Zaku's on the other side of this, so let's see what happens.
G maneuver.
Ah, okay, so we need line of sight with the target. Alright. Yeah, it says within a massive range, but yeah, I think we just illustrated that you need line of sight to your target. A homing boost, yeah, basically everything I just explained. So yeah, Sazabi is your tank.
My shield is degrading. Shield up and holster. How's this?
Now, the Methuss is strictly a support mobile suit. Getting this thing in a straight fight is just a horrible idea. So your right click is these healing tethers that will help to actively heal an ally. You can see right there his health's going up pretty quick. We have a deployable mini turret. It's not all that effective, but if the enemy is weak from another engagement, it might be just low profile enough to finish them off. Because obviously it can be attacked and destroyed. Now, yeah, our F-Fire is a slower moving... It's a slower moving shot, but it actually deals splash damage. At least they thought it did. I mean, the guns are nice and responsive, but I just don't find they deal a whole lot of damage.
Activating my G maneuver.
Even your ultimate ability is basically just buffing an ally's attack and damage resistance for a short time, which is sort of the problem. Because your ultimate depends on having an ally to buff. So if you're playing a Methuss and you're not attached to the hip of some other player,
I'm on it.
this will also revive downed allies if you're linked to them.
Allied suit revived.
Unless you're attached to the hip of another player as a Methuss, you're not using it right. This is as support gets. So yeah, twin shot. Transform. I haven't gotten to that yet. The automated turret energy cable.
I'll get you up and running. Allied suit revived.
Feels like a shorter flight than Asshimar as well.
I'll get you up and running. Allied suit revived. Activate G maneuver.
Yeah, the G maneuver, once triggered, continues to work even if you disconnect the cables. Yeah, it is a very brief flight. As I demonstrated, you can still shoot while you're in that state. Not sure how well you'll be able to actually hit your targets. Now, the Gym Sniper 2, my first word of advisement is that probably at least half of the players you encounter in this game that are using the Gym Sniper 2 are probably using aimbot. So, if you notice the Gym Sniper 2 is really ruining your day, especially with critical headshots, yeah, they're probably aimbotting. I've made a few headshots, but only when enemies are kind of standing still, because obviously that makes it substantially simpler. If they're really moving around, you're probably going to make body hits or want to go for body hits just to improve your chances of hitting anything. It takes about 3 or a little over half the mag to actually run down a target's health that way. Whatever you do, do not try using this without aiming down sights, because that reticle... I could be right in front of one of these guys and not hit him. If you end up in a close engagement, use the head Vulcan. It's not great, but it's better than this thing, which... I mean, look at this. I'm right in front of the guy, I can't hit him. Now, of course, you've got a launch pad, which can be used to get yourself up to higher vantage points. It can also be used to allow your allies to get up to higher vantage points, which highlights this unit's role as a support unit. Along with this, which is a remote revive, allowing you to revive enemies without exposing yourself to hostile fire. Or at least exposing yourself more than briefly. But yeah, up against pretty much all of the units, a critical headshot with this thing is an instant down. That reticle, though. That is a yikes reticle. Our G maneuver is a spot every enemy pretty much on the map. Very helpful for your teammates. Even helpful for you, because if you're peeking around a corner, you know exactly where to aim because you already got their head in sight. I didn't exactly give a great show of that, considering I missed my target.
I'll get you up and running. Reload. Revival complete. Try this on the sides.
Yeah, don't think you can quick scope with this thing either. The aim down sight's time is hilariously slow. And I've already demonstrated how inaccurate it is if you try to not do that. It's not a good time. I wonder how that's going to make the Zaku's job harder. See if the AI is programmed to actually... Oh yeah.
Need a revive? I'm on it. Revival complete.
Yeah, that Zaku is clearly specially programmed, considering that it... Oh my god, yeah. Do not try using this thing without aiming down the scope. It is just an absolute joke. Let's... Yeah, sonar visor. Also reduces thruster gauge consumption while hovering, and allows the use of the scope while mid-air for the duration. Oh, so it actually has auxiliary functions.
Revival complete.
See if we can work up to that.
Ready.
Okay, so let's throw that down.
Activating my G maneuver.
Test this out. Kind of a very circumstantial benefit that I'm not entirely sure that that's worth it. The Asshimar. This is a good multi-role suit. I definitely say it's on the offensive end of things. It has no defensive abilities really what to speak of. You got your 3-round burst. It's reasonably accurate. Don't expect it to be perfect. You can see the circle there, so it has some bloom. got that charge shot, which has more travel time. I'm not entirely sure of the merit of the charge shot. A napalm grenade, good for some very brief enemy denial. Protecting objectives, it's also useful.
Need a revive? I'm on it. Allied suit revived.
I almost never hit with that thing. I mean, it's more powerful than the basic burst, but I question its utility. And then the ultimate, which, kind of like the Zaku, is a bit of a schlep. Again, it only really knocks the targets down to half their health. And unlike Barbatos, you can't immediately follow up with, you know, another attack to finish them off. Key point here is the transformation is it feels much longer than the Methuss. And you have a kind of extended flight time, so the way you're meant to use the Asshimar is basically death from above. Fly up, use your extended hover time, and hit the enemy from where they are less likely to expect it. That charge does inflict stun, though. So you can potentially knock enemies out of things like explosive disarmament. Yeah, charge shot. Charge the beam for a short time before firing a powerful long-range burst. 3-round burst. No ADS. But it doesn't particularly need it. You've got a punch, knockback and stun, the napalm grenade, and the transformation. Yeah. The Asshimar is easy to understand, but like I said, to get the most out of it, it requires a bit of skill and the right maps. This is not a mobile suit to use on every map. Alright, we're halfway through. Sorry if this is taking a minute, but I want to be as thorough as possible. Dom is another support unit. For starters, it can armor up allies with a gun. No defensive capabilities to speak of, and it's got a limited dash. But the thing is, in terms of support, this is definitely more of an offensive support unit because it can lay mines. Which...
let's give this a try.
Not super powerful, but the thing is, you will know when your mines go off. I'm going to try and set some here. And from the other side of the wall... where this is devastating is if you have another unit drawing aggro, and you get enemies kind of clustered together, perhaps a bit closer than we have here. This is a little too far apart. But you can basically just let this rocket off and take advantage of that splash damage. Your backup if the target is too close, because yes, you can damage yourself with your own rockets, is to use the beam. The beam is not super useful. Like, it's basically your last resort. Like, oh shit. And then the ult. Basically lets you knock these units around. Unfortunately, the damage is a little underwhelming.
Need a revive?
But yes, while the Dom Trooper is very offensively oriented, getting into a direct fight with an enemy is probably a bad idea. If the target is maneuvering, these missiles can be very difficult to hit. You really have no alternative except maybe like spamming mines in front of yourself, which you will take friendly fire damage from those as well. Like, yep, there we go. So hang back, find a corner, and basically peak rocket. Peak rocket. Best shot you can make it. Peak rocket. And just repeat that. Take advantage of the Dom's natural kind of glidiness to seesaw in and out. It's a solid unit. I enjoy using it, but then again, I'm fine with running support. I'm actually good at it.
I'm on it. Revival complete.
So let's give it a look. Screaming Nimbus. Suction sensor mines, the armor gun. Prevents projectile shots for the duration. Well, on me or them? Well, definitely on me. I just tried firing the rocket while that was going up. Turn A is a weird one. A lot of people have difficulty categorizing Turn A. In terms of its direct fire capability, it has more shots than the RX-78 and a much tighter spread without aiming down sights, but it's the ADS that makes me feel like this unit was probably intended for more ranged work, because if you do aim down sights, you charge up a shot, and once that shot is charged, it'll pass through shields and multiple targets and deal significantly more damage. Mind you, it does cut your magazine in half because you use 2 shots per thing instead of 1. But note here, we have 4, well, we're about to have 4 Zaku's lined up, and I'm going to be damaging all of them in sequence. Only if you let it charge fully. Yeah, that makes it a powerful ranged unit. Now, your sumo suplex throw is more of an emergency, the enemy's in my face, because think about it, it does get them some distance away when used. You've got a nice healing, bolstering ability. Makes you a little bit tankier. Yeah, Moonlight Butterfly, it can be difficult to control. If you can keep it on the target, it is pretty devastating. The beam rifle, highly accurate weapon with minimum recoil and accuracy loss. Charge the weapon. More it is charged, but decreasing its projectile speed. Fully charged attacks pierce through enemies. Moonlight Butterfly. Damaging all enemies in a trail beneath you. Overhead throw, and yeah. So it's a weird combination of like solid ranged performance, but a melee gimmick, and a self-healing ability, which definitely seems more suited to a direct combatant. Turn A defies categorization. Or at least easy categorization. The Guntank. Do not make the mistake of thinking the Guntank is an aggressor unit. Yes, it's an offensive unit, much like the Dom, but it's intended for support, because, I mean, so if you're not aiming down sights with the rocket missile launchers, because yes, these are not machine guns, they're actually firing missiles, canonically, you can lock onto multiple targets, and the damage you deal is not super great, but you are dealing it across several enemies at once. You can focus a single target, and increase the range by going ADS. Don't underestimate the power of that tackle either. Weirdly, one of your special abilities is an accelerated repair with a 12-second cooldown. Yeah, the DPS that you can manage with just the machine guns on this thing is less than the Zaku II. That's my point in why you don't want to use this as like a direct aggressor, especially because if you get in close and try to use something other than the guns, like say your cannons, you can damage yourself in the process. Mind you, you can knock enemies around with the dash, and you can also temporarily stun them by using the tackle function if you interrupt the dash, which I've actually used to kind of throw melee units like Barbatos off. Give them a tap, plug them with the cannons, and just machine gun down whatever health they have left. Now, the tricky part to use is the ultimate here, because here's the thing, your body is still vulnerable to damage while you have your G-maneuver active. However, the core fighter you launch is also susceptible to damage. Now, if your Guntank is destroyed while the core fighter is still in the air, it doesn't interrupt the core fighter on its attack. Only if the core fighter is destroyed is the attack basically neutralized. But you do end up leaving your body vulnerable after launching. Yeah, it makes for a nice big explosion. Another thing you got to familiarize yourself with is that the cannons have a distinct drop-off, so at this distance, it's probably not a lot of vertical pull you need. Yep, that was dead on. But if you pull further back, like say at the... Okay, so this does have a maximum range. Yeah, the effectiveness of these things drops exponentially the further out you go, and actually hitting with the cannons... Yeah, look at that vertical thing. Up against a moving target, you're not even going to manage. Now note, if you do find yourself in a bit of sticky business, don't forget, in addition to your 2 dashes, you can use the tackle to pull yourself further out. Because yes, despite the 1200, well, here's the thing, this has less health than the Sazabi. So, if that doesn't indicate to you that this is not, ironically, mind you, ironically, this is not a tank unit, I don't know what does.
Activating my G maneuver. Activating G.
We have the Gym. Right now, the Gym is the ultimate counter for the Gym 2 Sniper BS, because you can put up your shield, you can still move, and critically, you can still fire back at the enemy, and the spread is minimal enough that you can make accurate, potentially critical shots at a distance. Now remember, reloading will require you to drop your shield, and up against moving targets, making those critical headshots is not going to be quite as straightforward. But the thing is, you actually have a decent suite of additional abilities. Mind you, a lot of them do require dropping your shield, albeit briefly. If you get some forward momentum behind it, you can chuck that place charge out, and you can detonate it without dropping your defense. It's roughly equivalent to the napalm used by the Asshimar.
Need a revive? I'm on it. Allied suit revived.
Need to let that get damaged again. So yeah, you can get critical hit headshot while you're tucking behind that shield, so if your enemy busts out a Gym Sniper 2, whip the shield out. You even got a nice knockback if your enemy decides to get up in your face about something. And we have a healing grenade.
Combat support.
It's not great, but it's better than nothing.
Try this on for size.
So yeah, I've had some good matches with the Gym, bizarrely. Typically I bust it out if there's a Gym Sniper that's giving everybody static, because, yeah, this is naturally the counter to that. Yeah, unlike the Gundam, you can't actually dash with this thing out. You can boost... Oh, nope, can't do that either.
Shield is failing. Let's give this a try.
That's one important detail to note. Unlike the Sazabi, you do not have a lot of health apart from your shield with this thing. So your shield goes up to 1300, you've got only 800 actual health. So generally, keep that shield up, keep your back to the wall, keep your allies behind you. Do whatever possible to make sure that your enemy is only hitting the shield. And if this shield pops, duck and cover. Now your ultimate is a bunch of homing mines. They're pretty potent, but the problem is they can be shot down. The enemy can destroy them before they, like, home in and detonate, so... that kind of takes the shine off of them. Beam rifle's fairly accurate. This is basically Moon Gundam accuracy. Not quite the same damage, I don't think. Homing mine, shield in front of you. So, knockback, it doesn't say stun, though, for the shield bash. Now, again, I have to make some conjecture on these units. So, the Marasai has a gimmick, and it is the gimmick that people simultaneously complain about, and the players who use the Marasai heavily justify as being Marasai's only real reason of being used in the first place. That doesn't speak well for the balance of the unit. But you have the Sea Snake, or Sea Serpent. Now, my complaint here is that in the classical anime, this thing could immobilize a target, and deliver damage via electricity, but there was no yo-yo. It could not yoink a target towards the mobile suit that fired it. However, in this game, it does. So, Sea Snake Ensnare, uncoil the Sea Snake to damage, stun, pull the first enemy hit towards you. Here's the trouble. Most players will hit a target with this thing, which moves much faster than the Gundam's hammer, and it has less wind-up, and they'll immediately follow with the Fedayeen rifle's beam blade. Melee strike that lashes out in front of the suit, inflicts damage, and knocks back the target. Targets who are already stunned suffer an additional stun. These two together will basically finish you off, and if they don't, a quick tap at the beam rifle will do the rest of the job. And they can immobilize a large group of enemies by using the ultimate on it. Now, the complaint, of course, is both the range of the Sea Snake, because it feels like it can yoink you from an absurd distance. Honestly, I'd say it would be balanced if the stun was preserved, the distance, even the lack of wind-up, but no yoink. Because then you could still basically get a free kill by doing a Sea Snake and following it immediately with a beam blade, but you'd have to get close to the target to do it. Being able to yank you like a mile and a half away from your allies and then just finish you off with a 1 or a 2 tap, that's what makes the Marasai feel really cheap. I was tempted to go for this, the inner sweat in me sort of whispered in my ear, but the thing is, in all likelihood, this will probably be nerfed at some point, and I'll have wasted the effort, because Barbatos used to be even more powerful than it is, and it got nerfed to the point where a lot of players consider it the weakest of the melee suits. Considering the locked suits or the gated suits, because they're either grind-gated or pay-gated, are generally more powerful than the ones that you just have by default, it's not surprising that Barbatos has been watered down from its melee counterparts. Now, Exia. Melee, naturally, if you've watched Gundam 00, you should know that. Wrong button. Oh, wow. Okay, there we go. So here's the thing. Compared to Barbatos, it doesn't hit quite as hard, but it has a ranged attack in the form of throwing G and beam daggers. They're not super damaging, and they're not really powerful. Kind of like Barbatos' swing, like the horizontal swing, they're mostly just intended to finish off a target that somehow survived your initial thrust. GN Sword, Rush, and Slash. So move forward and strike an enemy unit. Power and movement range increase with charge time. So yeah, you charge that up, which is noisy. That's your warning that an Exia is nearby. And then during Transam, the cooldown and max charge times are shortened and damage is increased. So that basically just gets buffed. Now the GN Sword and GN Short Blade rotating slash. Spinning slash attack that knocks back the target. Targets who are stunned suffer an additional stun. Changes to GN Beam Saber during Transam. Now, I'm not entirely sure what difference that's supposed to make. GN Beam Saber. Only available in Transam mode. Cut forward through enemies, damaging any targets in your path. So, a rush attack? That's how I'm reading that. Quick Step. Leap a set distance in any direction during Transam cooldown time is reduced, and 2 can be stored at once. This is a bit of an advantage over Barbatos, because in confined spaces, Barbatos' parabolic leap doesn't get you nearly as far, because you just sort of bunk into the ceiling and drop down wherever you are. You don't get the same sort of range. This, because it says in any direction, so I'm curious if you can look somewhere and launch yourself in that direction with this, but since I haven't played Exia, I can't speak on that. And then Transam, again, just ups all of this. You swap this for the Beam Saber, this gets buffed, this gets buffed. Not super durable, but damn, Exia is hard to hit. And if it lands that charged hit on you, you're basically dead. It's basically like getting hit with Barbatos' bonk, but way easier to use than the bonk. Now, Mahiroo. So the Rendo grenade. This was a missile launcher in the anime, if I remember correctly. Fires a grenade that bounces off walls and explodes. So, grenade launcher. Steadies the weapon and increases rate of fire. And then, of course, we have the toroidal shield with internal... Mahiroo... Okay, so Turn A Gundam, first and foremost, is not as well known as most of the other series that these mobile suits come from. I don't see a lot of players using Mahiroo. I've seen more recently, but I haven't really seen it in action enough to judge how all of this works. I mean, this looks and sounds like a kind of heavy attack. It's got a melee hit like Turn A, despite the fact that it's not a melee unit. Sensor Dome scanning can penetrate walls, but spotted units are only revealed to you, specifically. And then the Rendo Grenade Rush, where you equip 2 of the grenade launchers, and yeah, you fire a bunch of them. This is another kind of support unit, because the grenades... This has, like, a significant range. Much like Turn A, this is something you want to use at a distance. The forward flip kick feels more like something you'd use as a, oh god, they're on top of me, get them off, type of, you know, emergency backup maneuver. This might honestly be broken. Nope, there we go. So, basic slash. A cleaving strike with a large heat hawk, effective against close range targets to the front. Strike pierces enemy units. Don't know what that means. Guard tackle, raises arms to guard unit. Perform a forward tackle attack while guarding, inflicting damage, knocking back and disabling the shields of enemies hit. So, shield cracking. Shield cracking. Let's start there. Large Heat Hawk Shockwave. Mighty swing of the large Heat Hawk that unleashes piercing shockwaves against enemy units. This will pass through multiple units, not unlike Turn A's charge shot, so you can amplify the amount of damage you're dealing because you're hitting multiple targets at once. It's basically a railgun, which is an extremely powerful ranged option for a mobile suit that is already devastating as a close-range unit. This here is temporary invincibility, but unlike the Zaku II ranged temporary invincibility, where you can't attack but you can move, here you can't attack and you can't move, but the whole time you are taking damage, you're building up the rage meter, and once you've built up the rage meter, you can trigger Zeon's Rage, which grants super armor and increased damage. So basically, sort of a Methuss buff to just make you tougher. And then this rotating slash has got to be one of the more broken ultimates, because this thing will wipe an entire team. It lasts a really long time, does a crazy amount of damage, and from what I've seen is not so difficult to control if you, like, use corners to shorten turning circles and so forth. This might actually be broken. And then Unicorn, the one that I actually got. Unicorn's a support mobile suit. Passive healing to allies.
Get you up and running.
Now, the healing is not necessarily quick, but note that it will heal all of your teammates around you simultaneously. You can also buff yourself and them
like you could use a hand.
with an armor boost. It is extremely short-lived, but in critical moments can make all the difference. Shield bash in case you need some personal space. Now, this beam Gatling is a little underwhelming. I mean, if you fire in short bursts, you can kind of keep it effective at medium range. I mean, you can see the reticle just swell out. But, of course, you can also aim down sights and get that much tighter. I like to suppress enemies with this, basically, like, fire around a corner continuously, just to discourage anybody from sticking their heads out. It's not helping my accuracy rating, but, you know, suppressive fire is a thing. Now, the weird part is, for all of its support credentials, the Unicorn's ultimate ability is strictly an offensive powerhouse. But a dangerous one, because it's one that takes time to use, and you can be eliminated before it does its thing. So you get 5 shots and a limited time. But it will railgun through multiple units.
Performing repairs.
And will basically two-shot them. As you can see. Got 2 dashes, its base health is average. Not great.
Looks like
you can buff it with the armor. Although, like I said, if you're using that and you're not near your allies, you're not getting the most out of it, because you could be armoring several guys on your team and not just yourself. Still, if you're in a panic button situation, hitting the armor can keep you alive, and that's sometimes worth it in and of itself. Yeah, this thing is very accuracy when aimed down sights, but the the rate at which it inflicts damage, because I'm going for headshots here, and you can see that it's not super powerful.
I'm reloading.
If you need personal space, that's what the shields are for. Knock them back, dazzle them a little bit.
Activating G maneuver.
Yeah, Psycho Frame Resonance, passive, continuously repair nearby allies. Shield Funnel. Now, here's my problem with the Shield Funnel. If it hits terrain, whether it's a slope or a wall, it has the attack itself has a very wide hitbox. You basically need to fire it in the clear in order for it to actually not hit the terrain and basically just void the attack. Takes damage in his knockback. Damages and tracks the highlighted enemy as it travels. The tracking is not great either. Psycho Field, armor, rapid fire. Yeah, pretty basic. I went for it because having a good support unit on a team is important, and I've noticed that the weakness of a lot of newer players is that they don't invest a lot in support, or they don't use their own unit support. Like, I've seen gym players not use the healing grenade on themselves or their teammates. I've seen Pale Rider not use the healing place device. So when you have a team that's going a little too, like, heavy on the offense, and they're not actually busting out, you know, their heals, being a Unicorn Gundam can basically save the team's skin. Seems like the shields deal damage even as... Are they actually shooting at the target as they fly towards it? Oh yeah, a little bit. Yeah, up close you can just cut loose with the beam Gatling here. The problem is, like I said, doesn't actually deal that much damage. You're probably getting more damage out of a Zaku machine gun.
Activating my G maneuver.
Yeah, getting a good timing down on that is a little tricky. Yeah, that's it. That's all the units. Strengths and weaknesses, general abilities, how they should be used. Support. Long range, mostly. Close range aggressor. Obviously close range aggressor, but with a gimmick. Tank. Defense. Strictly support. Long range support unit. Another aggressor, high mobility, low defense. Support unit, low defense but high offensive potential. Kind of like the RX-78, it kind of defies classification, but for the most part it does its best at ranged with the charge shot. A support unit, lots of damage, but it's not super fast and it has no defensive capabilities. It needs other units to draw aggro for it. Superb defense, and while low damage, effective at range, counter gym snipers with it. If you see an enemy gym sniper causing a team trouble, somebody needs to bust this thing out and at least peck at it to get it to just not shoot your team for a minute. Probably needs a nerf. Will probably get one at some point. Either longer deploy time on the Sea Serpent, or shorter range, or like I said, canonically, to keep it accurate, it should not have a yoink. Stun, yes. Damage, yes. No yanking the target towards you. So canonically, but yeah, you know, if you want to be really sweaty and cheap, here's the caveat why people say that they can't nerf it, is that its beam rifle has an aim down sights, but is not great in terms of damage. I mean, how much does it have in terms of... it doesn't list the actual ammo capacity, but yeah, without its Sea Serpent, it's really an underwhelming unit. Close range, melee and fast, definitely an aggressor unit, and one that's little broken right now. Don't know a whole lot about it, because like I said, it's kind of not something you see used all that often. Definitely maybe a bit broken. These things are devastating. And probably the most modest of the gated mobile suits, because it's a support unit. Offensively, apart from its beam rifle, it's not terrific. It doesn't have much in the way of defensive functions. Its main role, as a support unit would be, is to buff and protect its allies. So, if you're using a Unicorn, much like with the Methuss, if you're not attached to somebody's hip, helping them out, or they're not attached to you, you're not doing it right. Ideally, because the Unicorn can support several units at once, you should have at least half the team, two other guys, with you drawing aggro. A useful thing would be to have it paired with a shield unit, like a Jim or a Sazabi. I mean, you could theoretically use the Gundam, but the Gundam's shield is not as flexible. Because I've noticed my Unicorn runs work best when I am providing support from behind a shield wall, or at least a meat wall of other units. Like, Unicorn, Gundam, and Jim work together really well, and that's another point. Despite all of the individual stats of these units, you have to consider team composition. And that's sort of the problem, is that a lot of players in this game don't. They play the mobile suit they want to play because they're a fanboy of it, or they got killed by it last round, they think there must be something about it they don't know, and they want to use it this round. Thing is, when choosing a mobile suit, aside from challenges or what you want to play, consider what the team is using. You know, if somebody's using a Methuss, maybe bust out an Asshimar so that the flying units can stick together and support each other. If somebody's using a Unicorn, make sure that somebody has a shield to protect that Unicorn. And the same goes for countering your enemy. If somebody's using a Jim Sniper too, get a Jim on the field. You're not going to know what the enemy's using until you engage them, but take all factors into account. Mastering the individual units is but the beginning. You have to figure out how units mesh with each other. So, I have been Nex. That's a unit breakdown in Gundam Evolution, at least my experience with them and how to use them. I hope this has been insightful and informative for all of you. I hope my viewers are staying happy and healthy out there. I hope this has proven informative. And it's a free-to-play game, so I hope you play it. As always, fare thee well.